Almost 50 years ago, I sailed up the Foyle River into Northern Ireland. Convoys of U.S. troops and supply ships that reached Derry had survived the Battle of the Atlantic. They had faced U-boat wolf packs and treacherous seas to reach a safe harbor amid green hills and welcoming people. Almost 300,000 American servicemen and women passed through Northern Ireland during World War II. Soldiers trained here for the invasion of North Africa and the D-Day landings. U.S. sailors escorted convoys and hunted submarines from bases here, while American airmen patrolled the North Atlantic and practiced bombing runs. The history books don't devote much space to Northern Ireland's part in World War II, but the people of the North remember. It transformed their lives. They tell stories of those days yet. Now, in this season of anniversaries, the GIs themselves are returning to their home away from home. They've joined the circle by the fire to finish the tales, to renew old loves, and to bring back again that brave time when we were young and Yanks in Ireland.
The island of Ireland, where myth and memory intermingle, where stories tell what history passes by, and where a long time ago is never very far away.
My grandmother has often told me the stories about the American GIs that were stationed here during the war. It was a very enjoyable time for these Americans. They enjoyed the scenery and they enjoyed the welcome of the Irish people.
During World War II, Northern Ireland offered American troops a safe place to prepare for the fierce battles that would free Europe from the Nazis.
Can you tell me if this is the road to Enniskillen?
Aye, it is.
So how far is it?
Well, if you keep on going the way you're going at the moment, it'll be about 200 miles by way of Dublin. But on the other hand, if you like to turn and go back into Ulster there, you might find it's only about 5.
You mean to tell us that we're in a free state?
Aye, you are.
The south of Ireland, the Free State, soon to be the Republic, was newly independent from Britain and afraid of German invasion. It chose neutrality. But the north of Ireland, as part of the United Kingdom, had been at war since 1939.
Hello there, Sergeant.
Hello, boys.
This is Northern Ireland, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
There don't seem to be any boundaries around here.
No, it is a bit difficult. Sometimes indeed I don't know where they are myself.
Okay, thanks, Sergeant.
For the people here, the American presence represented a deliverance they remember still.
When I talked to some people about the Americans arriving on my radio show a few months back, I had no idea there'd be such a fantastic response. Everybody who rang in remembered events of the 40s with such clarity that they said it could have been yesterday.
The Americans called my mother Mum and my father Pup.
When my cousin Bill Bunting arrived here with the American forces, right at the very beginning, they were in Carrickfergus at the time, and he knew he had relations here.
For years and years, I used to wonder what happened to them, you know, because a lot of them was only 5 or 6 years older than me, you know, they were 18 years of age, some I remember them, you know, they weren't very old themselves.
Glenn Miller, Tommy Dorsey, Jive and Jitterbug, Babe Ruth, So Henry bars, gum, and of course, condoms. Nylon stockings, and as I said, I think the condoms and the stockings came in pairs.
People in Belfast, people all over the country were absolutely delighted. Bear in mind that we had been fighting a war almost completely on our own. I don't think it ever occurred to any of us that we were ever going to lose the war. but probably those who knew most about it wondered if we could ever win it.
To continue fighting, Britain needed supplies. Machinery, weapons, even food had to cross an ocean dominated by the German Navy. The Battle of the Atlantic would decide the outcome of the war, and in 1941, the Nazis were winning. Their most potent weapon was the submarine, or U-boat. Even before America entered the war, German U-boats had carried the conflict into U.S. waters, sinking merchant ships only a few miles out of New York Harbor. If Hitler cut their lifeline, the British would be forced to surrender. Small towns like Belize were thrust into the fray when peaceful Lough Erne became a watery airfield for the Sunderland flying boats of the RAF Coastal Command. Pilots took off from here to search for the U-boats in the spring of 1941. Churchill would later write, "The only thing that really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." The coastline of Northern Ireland was the front line of the Battle of the Atlantic. The United States sent Catalina flying boats as part of the Lend-Lease program. Pilots were also needed, but America was still neutral, so no American military personnel could be sent officially. But unofficially, arrangements were made. "Don't tell anyone," President Roosevelt said. "If Congress finds out, I will be impeached." Thus, a young Navy aviator, Leonard Tuck Smith, found himself on duty on the shores of Lough Erne.
Hello, Tuck. You're welcome back to Belize again after many years, I believe.
Oh, gee, you don't know how glad we are.
Is this your daughter here with you?
You just earned a buck.
Well, Tuck, you're still here to tell the tale, though I know you shouldn't have been here when you arrived in Ireland first. You came secretly. How did that happen?
I hear this story second-handedly, but I'm informed that our President Roosevelt, in conversation with Mr. Churchill, the Prime Minister, asked the question, how can we help? The Prime Minister says, right now I need some pilots to show our pilots how to fly these new Catalinas we're getting. The word came out to the fleet, so we're looking for volunteers. My commanding officer told me I was a volunteer.
So you came secretly to Lough Erne then?
Right.
To teach the RAF pilots about Catalinas?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
You could recognize the aircraft by the noise or the note of their engines. You know, you could recognize the Sunderland, you could recognize the Catalina. Sunderland was 4-engine aircraft, the Catalina was twin-engine aircraft.
We used to hear the Sunderlands go out every morning long before daylight, you know, according to the time of year, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or 4 o'clock, as the case may be, you know. And it was a sort of achievement. We thought it was a bit of achievement to hear that big roar going off the water, you know, that time in the morning. We weren't annoyed at it or anything like that.
We had our airplanes moored out behind this little island over here. Went from the Castle Archdale to the aircraft via boat, then taxied out in this long expanse of water, which is Lough Erne. Then we'd proceed out to the west through the Donegal corridor.
There was a 16-mile corridor across between Leitrim and Donegal, which was granted by the Irish government, and aircraft had to stay within that corridor. And as I said, Tuck Smith would have flown over here many a time in a Catalina.
On May 26, Tuck Smith joined the search for the most dreaded of all German warships, the Bismarck. Built in 1939 as the pride of the Nazi fleet, the Bismarck was the most advanced battleship of its time. In May 1941, it had eluded RAF surveillance and under a cover of clouds and bad weather was racing from its base in Norway to the open sea. With the Bismarck loose in the North Atlantic, no convoy would be safe. The young American could not sit this one out. Tuck joined the hunt for the Bismarck.
You were the man that spotted the Bismarck, which was causing havoc on the fleet. Is that right?
Yes.
RAF officer Dennis Briggs was the captain of the huge Catalina that took off that morning. Officially, he was the man who found the Bismarck, but it was really his co-pilot, the American who wasn't supposed to be there, who sighted the warship just before it escaped. They stayed with the ship until the attacks by planes from the Royal Navy carrier Ark Royal crippled the German battleship. Tuck Smith was the first American to play a decisive role in a World War II victory.
Bismarck had sunk the hood, I believe, a week or so ahead of time, and we were sent out to look for it. And this is where we departed from. Weather wasn't very good that night. Rainy, cloudy, low ceilings, and I'll never forget it. Shortly after we were airborne, we climbed up 2,500 feet, took departure, 2:30 in the morning, and it was about an 8-hour flight to get out to where we were assigned to look for the ship. No sooner than we got there, one of us spotted this thing on the horizon, and
that was it.
They identified us. They started shooting.
On behalf of everyone at Balik Pottery, I would like to welcome Tuck Smith and his wife, Loretta. It's tremendous to have you down for this very memorial occasion. And Tuck has tremendous stories to tell. I've been listening to some of his stories this morning and they're absolutely amazing. Very brave man. And on this occasion, I would like to present Tuck with a Balik plate.
I'm making this plate as a presentation piece to Tuck Smith. And believe it or not, Tuck is actually in there, but I don't think you can see him. I'll bet this brings back memories.
It sure does. I tell you, that's a marvelous picture.
Yeah, yeah.
But the only one you got a problem with it.
Yeah.
You haven't got how scared I was.
Is that you there?
Well, there you are, but you need a little more expression on my face. That is absolutely gorgeous.
It's just lovely.
Brings back very many exciting moments.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure to work on this actual piece. And to actually meet the person in question is even better.
My granddad was a soldier in our Civil War, and some of the most prized possessions I have of little threads and so forth of his uniform. My grandkids have got this, and they will love it, as will I. Thank you so much. God bless you.
You're very welcome. Lovely to have you here.
Tuck Smith could celebrate the present and remember the past.
Salmon fishing is a disease, actually. It affects you. I think it does.
You know any cure for it?
No.
Tuck, we're delighted that you're able to unveil this memorial for us today. It's dedicated to a crew who didn't make it home, and to the others as well.
Thank you so much.
The people who lived through this time have never forgotten the sacrifices made by all the young airmen.
These are graves of all young airmen that have lost their lives in the war. The first one I see here is without a name. It just says, known unto God.
You have the traditional Irish respect for death and the dead, and they had great respect for any of the American chaps that had lost their lives, because nearly everyone would have relations in America.
There were many Irish Americans among the troops that arrived in Belfast on January 26, 1942, 8 weeks after Pearl Harbor.
Sure the fairest flower
The first U.S. soldiers to enter the war in Europe came initially to Northern Ireland. They were billeted throughout the countryside. The hit parade of 1942 reflected their experience. Johnny Doughboy Found a Rose in Ireland went to number 1.
In Ireland, and she stole his heart with smiling eyes of blue. He said, darling, 'tis my duty to make an American beauty.
The first American soldier to set foot on the soil of Northern Ireland was Milburn Hankey of Hutchinson, Minnesota. He returned after 50 years to join the Lord Mayor of Belfast in rededicating the memorial built in memory of all those who served in World War II. Hankey was not the only veteran to come back to Northern Ireland.
Lord Mayor, any veterans, friends, first I wish to read
also returning was perhaps the most famous unit ever to have served here, Darby's Rangers.
Over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming, there's drumming everywhere, so beware, say a prayer, send the word over there, we're coming over, and we won't be back till it's over there.
I'd like to welcome you sincerely to Ireland on behalf of Aer Lingus. And in Irish we say, Céad Míle Fáilte. That means 100,000 welcomes. Well, we say 10,000 welcomes.
This elite volunteer corps, the spearhead of every European invasion of World War II, was born in Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland, the only American unit ever assembled on foreign soil.
It is perhaps difficult to envisage that the area covered by the Sunnylands estate was once a teeming military encampment. It must look so different from the open fields and countryside which existed here in 1942. Young men from the United States of America were possibly experiencing their first visit outside their country, and their mission was one which would lead them into great danger and even death. In June of 1942, a decision was taken which we are now gathered here 50 years later to commemorate. That decision was to form a US version of commandos. Major William O. Darby, aide to Major General Hartle, Commander US Army Northern Ireland, was selected to form a group at the camp sited here. Out of 2,000 volunteers from US units based throughout Northern Ireland, 500 were chosen and activated as the 1st Battalion US Rangers. This very special battalion, affectionately known as Darby's Rangers, was subsequently to become one of the most decorated units of World War II.
But we are tremendously moved, we are honored, and we are very, very grateful.
I think I want to bottle this so I can take it home and take a whiff once in a while, okay?
Sister has been 46 years now in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She married the first GI in Carrickfergus.
Oh, no. Really?
Yes.
Okay, here's a piece of gum. That's what we gave out 50 years ago when we were here.
Well, I was the local hairdresser in Carrickfergus, and I made all the Carrick young ladies beautiful to meet their the doughboys, the Rangers.
I don't believe I was ever as young as you are, though.
Or I was never as good looking as you are.
At least you're representative of today's Rangers.
Well, yeah, but we take a lot of our heritage, you know, from the yard.
We liberated Tata. Concentration camp. Oh, at Munich. Munich. Yeah, north of Munich.
This would be kind of like our Holy Land, if you will. You know, this is where it all started, so now I have to get back to the regiment and tell them they need to make the trail to Mecca, if you will. There's our black rocks.
The tough physical tests at the Sunnylands camp in the countryside around Carrickfergus decided who would be a ranger. You had to be strong, you had to be smart, you had to be brave. The task ahead would take everything a man could give, and their order was Rangers lead the way. Carrickfergus is a place that honors its history and is proud of its links to the United States. John Paul Jones fought the first American naval battle here when his ship, the Ranger, captured the Drake. Andrew Jackson's family came from Carrickfergus. And now the men of Darby's Rangers have become an official part of the Carrickfergus tradition. They came to share their memories with each other and the community.
Oh, my goodness, I
postcard
haven't seen that, Dad.
Those are my letters home.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
There's your first
Here's Father Basil saying services for our first dead in the landing at our zoo. This is Austin right here. Yeah. He had his feet in my face in a British pyramidal. Doesn't it? Place, isn't it?
This is a beautiful exhibit.
Martin got killed. Al Miller got killed. Newsom's dead.
We lost count.
Anybody
counting?
I don't know if anybody's counting.
Well, it'd be easier to count the ones still living then.
But you know, there are 5 of those guys standing right here in this room. Right.
This is Father Basil on the left conducting the services for the burial of those 3 casualties at our zoo.
It's a goose pimply thrill to see all of this.
It's a flag that I carried with me all through the war, and I'd like to leave it here for this museum in the name of Darby and all Rangers.
This brings back all the memories.
Except we don't look the same.
No.
Roy Murray.
That's right. There's Chester.
Ranger exploits became the stuff of legends, but casualties were high.
Just back from the fighting fronts are 199 fighting men with an unparalleled combat record. They are United States Infantry Rangers, spearhead in every campaign from Dieppe to Anzio. Unofficially, they are called Darby's Rangers, a tribute to the man who organized and trained them and then led them through a total of 8 months of fierce frontline fighting. Today, the Army Hour presents some of Darby's Rangers, including their commanding officer, Colonel William O. Darby, who reports from Fort Benning, Georgia.
The Rangers were activated in North Ireland, 19th of June, 1942. They were all volunteers. We picked them for physical fitness, youth, and eagerness to fight. Some people think of the Rangers as supermen. This, they are not. They don't think of themselves as home run hitters or star quarterbacks. They're just garden variety infantry foot soldiers, every one of them, young and willing to do a job. As their organizer and leader, it's hard to say enough about their spirit and ability. I think the best way to show that is to talk to some of them.
What age were you when you joined the Army?
I had to be 21 to be an officer. I was exactly 21.
What rank were you?
What rank? I was a 2nd lieutenant. I was the junior most 2nd lieutenant in the Rangers. Fresh out of college. My name is Wayne Rona, and I was born and raised in the state of Minnesota, the United States. And the place that I first came was at Port Rush, in between Port Rush and Coleraine. We were told that there's going to be a special unit started in our army.
Did you get hurt at any time?
Well, I was wounded once in Italy. Well, you show them. I have special shoes because I had my foot shot off. And if you'll notice,
This visit gave each ranger a chance to make a permanent record of his memories.
Know where it was. Rumors got around it was over in Ireland someplace, and we ended up in Belfast.
When we landed at Salerno,
Fox won the Distinguished Service Cross, but I'm not going to tell you about that. I'll tell you about his romance.
And I had a live grenade in my hand that I didn't throw yet.
When the Rangers were at our zoo, we used to take an extra 5-mile speed march up to the Army hospital.
We were trained by the most astute and tough Scottish training instructors that I've ever run into.
So I yelled back at him in French, pêcheur, which means fisherman. With that, he said, "Ça va," and went on back into his cabin. So the landing was completed without any general alert being made.
Northerly, out of Naples, Italy, there's a valley of Venafro.
And here at Carrickfergus, it's just been one of the highlights of my life.
They even became television stars. Joined by Milburn Henke.
Oh, we made a lot of friends here. Paddy Woods, and he ran the pub in Dungannon, and he was especially a good friend of ours. Every time we got broke, why, you hocked in your wristwatch, and at the end of the month when you got paid, then you paid him.
They're lovely gentlemen. They've been all the talk in Northern Ireland already, and we've just come off the programme, something like 10 or 15 minutes, and already people are phoning up. They're trying to find out is such and such here, is such and such there.
The Rangers came from units that had been stationed throughout Northern Ireland, and they went to visit old haunts.
He was the guy that formed us. He was our leader. I would like to find the place where we were billeted, and I have my diary here, and as I read it here, it says, our next place was right smack in town. An old distillery about 20 years before became our next home.
Are you sure this is where you
Yeah, right up there. Oh, yeah. We lived on the second floor. Down here was where the kitchens and the mess hall was. And then around behind was the storage yard where we had all of our equipment. There was another building back there that had the whiskey stored in it that was supposedly put in there in 1921 and 1922.
We also went into Coleraine. We were from a unit down at Castle Rock. We used to come up there because we were always looking for good watering places and see if there are any girls in town. Somehow we always ended up at Mary's Bar, where we had something called Coleraine whiskey. I'm sure they made it the night before, so the revenuers would never get it. And I managed to lose my voice twice in this bar, and I'm not that talkative. We're looking for Mary's Bar.
Mary's Bar! There's a couple of seats here on the left-hand side.
No, I was there in 1942. I was on the first boat, first troops in town.
I was on the Irish Guard and put me off for smoking.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're doing intelligence work.
Oh, intelligence work,
Yes.
yeah. Probably checking up on us.
Well, this tastes smoother now. I think they must make it a week in advance. We were here in 1942, and we'd come and visit this bar, and do you remember any of the people who were here?
Well, Mary Craig was a well-known woman in Coleraine, and everybody that bought the bar just kept her name on it.
There was a camp just opposite where I lived called a Givy camp. And the Americans came in there and they practiced, it was engineers, and they made pontoon bridges. Now before they...
That was
you folks.
Yeah.
Heard about the Emerald Isle, but for the first time I was seeing it, and the country was just so beautiful, and it was reflected in the personalities of the people. They were sort of comfortable and friendly and very hospitable.
Let's go, Bob.
Okay.
This looks like old training.
Yeah.
They tested themselves against the Giant's Causeway, County Antrim's 60-million-year-old geological wonder.
Are we over the hill yet? I'm on the Castle Rock Golf Course, and this is where I was stationed from about February 25th or 26th of 1942 till June 2nd, 1942, when I volunteered to leave this nice area and go into the Rangers. It looks even better now, and of course I'll just put this right in. don't show the last of that. I met the pastor's daughter, and she wanted to know if I played golf, and I stupidly said yes. And so we went out in the links one day, and she beat me. I thought, okay. So we went out again, and she beat me again. And of course, I blame it all on the wind there.
I used to know a young lady there by the name of Audrey Love. Her folks run a tea house. And we used to go down the same golf course, Colonel. We used to walk around though, too. I used to be our door for our company lived in this.
Ray Rodriguez, accompanied by his wife, looking for the girl he had walked out with in 1942.
Do you know any Loves?
The Loves? Oh, yes. Mrs. Love is dead now. They owned the bar.
We used to own a tea room at one time.
Yes, they owned a tea room as well.
She had a daughter named Audrey?
Audrey Love, yes. Her daughter is married to Philip Monteith, and they live just in Sea Park. They're still alive.
Audrey? Yes. You remember me?
What is that? Well, did you actually remember my name? Oh, you did remember it. Mm-hmm. You remembered it was Audrey Love. Mm-hmm. Oh, did you? Good gracious me.
Because somebody asked me if I remember anybody that lived in this town. I said, well, it's been 50 years. I said, but I remember one person. I remember Audrey Love.
We were just friends. Well, now, perhaps if we'd been more, I would have remembered. Huh? Probably never forgotten.
No.
That's right. You'd always remember that.
Years ago.
It's been a long time. That's a long time. A long time. And you probably never thought you'd see me alive.
I didn't think I ever come back here.
Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creation. Oh, my soul, praise Him, for He is thy help and salvation.
In the 1940s, American servicemen came to this province, came at a time when Belfast had suffered through the Blitz of the Luftwaffe, came at a time when victories in Europe were very scarce. Their coming, your coming, brought something of hope to the hearts of many people. Hope of deliverance, hope of better days ahead, hope of peace. What counted in this outfit was what a man had within him.
3 Ranger battalions led the way in the invasion of North Africa, on to Sicily, and up through Italy. Later, 2 other Ranger battalions would silence the German guns at Omaha Beach. But their young leader was killed by sniper fire in Italy on the last day of the war in Europe. William Darby was awarded the rank of Brigadier General posthumously. In April of 1944, General Patton had come to Armagh, Northern Ireland. He told the troops that they would take part in the greatest military invasion in history. In May, in Belfast Harbor, General Eisenhower reviewed sailors on the USS Quincy, one of the ships that would carry the troops to Normandy. But as more and more men and materials poured into Northern Ireland in preparation for the final conflict, the enemy stepped up its attacks. Again, the sea was the battlefield. Again, the U-boats were the nemesis. But the Navy had a new weapon. It had commissioned hundreds of small destroyer escorts designed to fight off the submarine and protect the convoys. They were prepared to draw fire themselves to protect the larger ships. Northern Ireland became a frequent port of call for the destroyer escorts. Unique among these ships heading for Belfast Harbor was the USS Mason, the first American warship ever manned by an all-black crew. Although African Americans had comprised 40% of the Navy in the Civil War, since 1900, the Navy had relegated them to service as cooks and waiters. At the urging of Mrs. Roosevelt, the President commissioned the Mason to give African American sailors the chance to prove themselves and take a warship into combat.
All the boys on the Mason were all raised right here in this country. And we couldn't go to a movie show or sit down to a counter in Woolworths even. We had to go around to the back. Then next thing you know, we were on a ship. We're scared, and we go to Ireland. And the people didn't even look at us as our skin color. They looked at us as true American fighting men.
Our first, our maiden voyage was into Belfast. That was where our last stop.
That's it.
Was the maiden voyage and took us 42 days.
There's always a question in your mind what you're gonna meet, how the people will greet you. Because here we were so many black guys, it was 160 of us on one ship. Whenever you go in any place, the captain always say, don't go alone. Be 2 or 3 together and stay together no matter what. So we are apprehensive at first, but then when these greetings start coming our way without any effort.
You see, sometimes when we talk about Ireland and how well we were received, you might get the idea that it was a novel experience for them, but if I'm not mistaken, I'm told that some black soldiers had been there prior to our arrival. So our coming in was not a novel experience. It was their normal way of treating people. That's what I'm impressed about.
One thing I noticed, that the girls, they were beautiful. They didn't wear any lipstick, no type of makeup, not one. And this was like in June of '44.
There's a girl sitting here, and I'm on one side, and another shipmate on the other side. And I had never learned to dance, but everybody was dancing. So somebody came over and asked this girl for a dance, to dance. And she turned to me and said, may I dance with him? Now that made an impression on me, showed me how courteous she was. And that's why I remember her name, Sadie O'Neill. I never forgot it.
The sailors were invited to Cayley's for traditional Irish dancing.
And she said, "Did you ever hear of the blacker?" And I heard that word black, see? My ears perked up. I said, "What you say?" She said, "You ever heard of the blacker?" The black? And the other guy said, I'm asking, what is she saying, man? What is she saying? She sitting on my lap calling me black something? and he said, oh, no, she wants to know if you ever heard of the blackout. And I said, oh, sure, New York, we have plenty of blackouts and all like that. And then we danced around in the big, I couldn't dance, but I danced around in that circle, boy.
The circle, and you go one way, and then you
yeah.
this way, the circle. Then all of a sudden, a beat from the band, and everybody started going the other way, and then you fall all over each other until I got used to it. I waited and listened for the beat, and when they went this way, I went this way. It was lovely. It was really beautiful. I thought that was wonderful. It made us feel good, all of us.
The most impressive thing for me was to meet people on the street, perfect strangers, how they walked up and greeted us. And it was such a shocker to me because the ordeal that we're going to in our own U.S. Navy, to get over there and these people, first time meeting us, came up with such courtesy. And one lady apologized for the weather being cloudy. Yeah. Apologized for the weather being cloudy. You know, just to be treated like that, and we had to travel all that distance to be exposed to that kindness, just human kindness that came out of those people's heart.
And when you contrast that with the way we were treated on the ferry that ran from, well, there's a ferry from Norfolk to Newport News or Chesapeake Bay. And I was sitting there in a lunch counter with one of my shipmates who was white. And we both ordered. The woman looked at me kind of strangely, but she gave me what I wanted. But then a little man about this big came out and said to me, he used the N-word, and told me that I should not be there and to get up in uniform.
When I got to Ireland, like I say, it was the only place that I was called a Yank and knew it. That's what they meant. They didn't say tan Yank like they did in other spots where we'd been. They called me Yank. The same thing as what the white sailors was being called, Yank. And it was good.
But the moments of fun were brief. Then it was back to the open sea and the dangers of convoy escort duty. The Mason's men led the way. As a young sailor, Martin Davis made 6 trips to Derry. Now a naval historian and a leading authority on the role of the destroyer escort ships in World War II, Davis returned to Derry, which had been the command center for the destroyer escort. Here the anti-submarine role was plotted.
Particularly in the latter part of the war, to seek out these vessels rather than just defend the merchant ships we were then going after the submarines.
The greatest victory of the hunter-killer group came when the task force attached to the carrier Guadalcanal captured the German U-505. Throughout the war, the Navy desperately wanted to capture a German U-boat and learn its secrets. The huge Guadalcanal carrier, with all its planes and convoy of destroyer escorts, set out on the hunt with Captain Dan Gallery in command. But finally it was the actions of 2 very young sailors, one American, one German, that would decide the fate of the U-505. When American sailor Sinan Lukosius boarded the German sub, he found water pouring into the engine room. The U-boat was sinking. Hans Gerbler, one of the last German sailors to leave the boat, had opened the sea strainer to scuttle the sub. But Luke found the cover and put it back on. Thus, the U.S. Navy captured its first prize on the high seas since 1815. This German U-boat, part of the fleet that was the only thing Churchill feared, rests now at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, the only one in the U.S. and one of only 3 on display anywhere. Luke and Hans met on the U-505, there to exchange memories of that June day in 1944.
I was on the USS Pillsbury, and our ship was assigned to convoy duty in the North Atlantic. And after being on convoy duty, the submarines were such a menace, they were sinking so many ships, that the United States decided to have a killer task group, which is assigned to a small aircraft carrier and 5 destroyer escorts. And our duty was just to hunt submarines.
I was 17 years old when I joined the Navy, and I made my first trip on this vessel when I was 18, with 18 years. And I served on the U-505 till the last day when we got captured on the 4th of June, 1944.
When the sub came up, surface, the stern was down.
Yes.
And then our whaleboat come right alongside. We could jump right across.
Yeah.
So we could see you fellas were jumping off. And there was one of you fellas that was shot, that was killed, was still up there.
Yeah,
and
Fisher.
we moved him into the water.
Yeah.
Right, so that's why I remember. Now, when we came out of the sub, we closed the hatch because the water was coming in.
Yeah.
So we didn't know if the sub was going to sink, and we didn't want to help it sink.
I took this cover of that sea strainer to let water in the control room, and after a certain time it would have went into the diesel engine room and made the boat more, put more weight in the back of the boat so that it went straight down. Okay. But I did not know that the task force group had people like Luke already trained getting aboard that submarine. If I would have known about that, I would have thrown that cover in the bilge, so it would not have been so
Oh,
easy for that.
And as I come down here, I could see the water coming in here, and the cover was laying next to it. Now, what scared me most, and I says to my buddy Pickles, I says, Pickles, here goes nothing. We didn't know if it was depth charged or had a booby trap.
Yeah.
So, but I picked it up and nothing happened. So, and then I put it on and dogged it down. No water was coming in. Then I went in the engine room and helped Chief Jacobson with the engines.
Yeah.
Why we wanted the submarine is to see if we could get the code books. And as it happened, the fellas, the radio man, signalman, when they come down here, and my friend, the bosun mate Pickles, they came down here and they went in that direction there, in the radio shack, and they found the code books.
And now when we look at each other, look in our eyes, we can hardly believe that we almost killed each other. And 8 years ago, when I organized the first reunion amongst them so-called former enemies, him and me, we could not believe when we saw us the first time that we were supposed to kill. He was supposed to kill me and I was supposed to kill him. But that's something else during the war. People don't have faces. They're only targets, like ships, like tanks, like everything else. And that's what I have to say. I feel sorry for all them hundreds and thousands of poor guys who went down with the ships on the bottom of the sea.
The capture of the unscuttled 505 saved lives. News of the capture was radioed back to Derry, and the information gained from the code books was put to use immediately. For the first time, the U-boats were on the run. In Dr. Davis' judgment, Derry held the key to victory in the Atlantic. It was the most important convoy and communications base in the North Atlantic.
The average life of a German submarine was only 40 days from the date of launch to the time it was sunk.
The Allied command recognized this when it designated Derry as the port of surrender for the German U-boats in May of 1945. 43 German U-boats came to the docks of Lissahally to end hostilities formally and hand over the U-boats.
Surrender to take place of the U-boats. The U-boats had been the combatant naturally. It had been faced by all of the anti-submarine vessels that operated from here. This was the port from which they received their command. It was really Battle of Atlantic position. And when the submarines did surface and they did surrender, it was highly appropriate for them to come here. It was symbolic of victory.
Submarines which had been operating in the Atlantic were ordered to surface and surrender intact to the Allies. These were of the largest class, so large in fact that they could stay at sea for 50 days. Eight of them came to Londonderry in Northern Ireland, where they surrendered to the Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches.
One German captain suggested to the Allies that they now unite with the Germans to fight the Russians. He was turned down. Most of the Americans left to continue the war in the Pacific. But for the people of Derry, who knew the Yanks, the memories linger.
Two men that I would like to mention, that is, I hope they're living the day and well, is Captain Raymond Ward and his family, and Lieutenant Murphy, Lieutenant Commander Murphy and his wife. Great friends of mine. Mrs. Murphy used to come to the gatehouse, bring over a cup of tea, a little bun, and we'd sit having that cup of tea in the morning, yarning and talking about Derry here.
Colonel Ladd came over to take over for Colonel Bonham. He was like a father to me. He wouldn't let me pay any income tax to the local authorities. Anything I paid, he would give it back to me.
They can still recall the names. Even those who were children remember.
Major John Darby was called. And they used to come and take us kids, about a dozen of us, and they used to walk us way up the hill over there, called Gort Tree, they call it.
Martin Davis remembers the children who made him welcome.
Many years ago, many years ago, there are a number of girls who belonged to a dancing troupe just like yours. They were just about your age, and they were with us. They used to come down and entertained us aboard the ships, all of the sailors. And we looked at you, and we really, really, really enjoyed it. When I said looked at you, it's as if I'm talking to the same group now as we spoke to then. And they just looked like you, and as I was sitting on the side watching you, it just brought back memories that I can never, ever forget. We have photographs of youngsters that we had brought aboard our ship, and I can see them right now.
On the bottom photograph, we have Hugh again, Barney, and myself. We were eating on the Petite with the American sailors. The crew there, they looked after us well. In wartime, you weren't allowed aboard those ships. But if the captain of the ship issued a pass, then you got past the security to go aboard to do a bit of trading with the Yanks. They liked donuts, Swiss rolls, sponge rolls, milk. That was their favourite. And you could always do good business with them.
These boys sang in the picture queues. And while one was singing, the other would go round with the hat to make the collections. And then they were invited back to the ships for singing. And there was a few times there that the Yanks wanted to take these wee boys and get their voices recorded. But at that particular time, the father-in-law wouldn't hear tell of it.
And Hugh, in the photograph, nicknamed Fly, he had a pass for singing because he was one powerful singer. You could have said he was Ireland's Nelson Eddy. If I knew them what I know now, I'd be a millionaire, or I would be in Hollywood.
We were together.
Martin Davis and his wife Shane ended their visit to Derry at the home of musician and composer Phil Coulter.
On a ship,
they were joined by Frank Gallagher on the tin whistle.
Infantry battalion, whatever. They're a lot more scattered, but on one ship, you had to know everybody. People always talked with great affection about the American, particularly about the American sailors, and they felt that they'd become part of the community when they were here. I think in Marty's honour, we should, as an old sailor, we should have a bit of a hornpipe. Derry hornpipe. There you are, Marty, especially for you. This will bring you back. Yes, sir. So when you guys come off, you would there were dances and all sorts of stuff, right?
Absolutely. When we came ashore, it appears as if the whole city was made up of singers and dancers.
I just imagine one sailor on the deck of a warship heading out away from Derry, heading out Loch Foyle and going to war, looking back on what had been a good experience, having been made welcome, and the kindness, the gentleness on one hand, weighed up by the potential horror on the other hand. And that's what I've tried to capture in the song. I mean, you must tell me if I get it right or if I get it wrong, but it must have been quite a complex kind of a set of emotions.
It was, and you've described it perfectly well. I don't think I could do much better than that.
Well, I must play you the song and then you can tell me.
The name of the song and of Martin Davis's memories is A Home Away from Home.
Overhead, an Irish dawn is breaking, and this sailor is sad to say farewell to the warmth, the welcome, and the laughter, 'cause I've a feeling we're sailing into hell. Will I sunlight as it rises once more above Benon. It's a long way from Chicago, but I'll remember this home away from home. Now the coast of Ireland lies behind us, and God only knows what lies ahead. Will I still hear the sound of children singing when I'm surrounded by the dying and the dead? Will I ever feel the sunlight as it rises once more above Benon? It's a long way from Chicago, but I'll remember this home away from home.
And that's the way it was a half-century ago.
Strand, Port of Derry, Molly reeling, Molly rolling,